The mountains were calm that morning, wrapped in the clear air of early summer. The grass still held drops of dew, and the sky was bright without a single cloud. Somewhere above, hawks circled slowly, their cries echoing across the valley. In a small clearing by the forest edge, a lynx family moved carefully through the grass. The male lynx, heavy and broad-shouldered, stepped first, his ears twitching at every sound. The female followed, her eyes alert but calm, while their young cubs stumbled behind, exploring everything with clumsy curiosity. The cub was small, with pale reddish fur and faint spots along its sides. It stopped often, batting at insects or sniffing at roots sticking from the ground. The parents allowed some distance, though both kept their gaze fixed on the little one. Life in the mountains was harsh, and even a moment of distraction could mean danger. The sun rose higher, warming the clearing. Birds filled the trees with restless calls. The lynx cub pounced on a beetle, missing badly, and let out a soft growl of frustration. The male lynx lay down to rest, eyes half closed, but his ears remained sharp, scanning the stillness. The female circled to the far edge of the meadow, marking territory and pausing to sniff the air. Everything seemed ordinary, safe enough for a brief moment. Then the silence shifted. From the tall grass, a faint rustling began. The cub lifted its head, tilting one ear, but did not recognize the sound for what it was. The movement was too smooth, too deliberate. Shadows swayed in the grass as something massive slid closer. The python was nearly invisible, its scales blending with the earth and brush. It had moved silently down from the warmer lowlands, hunting in places it rarely reached, drawn by the scent of prey. The cub crouched, curious. Its mother was still some distance away, and its father was lying flat, hidden from the python's line of sight. The snake's tongue flickered, tasting the air, locking onto the scent of young flesh. In seconds, the predator closed the gap. Its body coiled low, head lifted slightly, waiting for the perfect moment. The strike came without warning. A sudden lunge, jaws wide, aimed at the cub's neck. The cub squealed, stumbling back, paws scraping the ground. The python's teeth scraped its fur but missed the hold, leaving only a thin line of saliva across its shoulder. The cub bolted toward the center of the clearing, crying out, its small voice sharp with panic. The male lynx was already moving. Muscles tense, he leapt from his resting spot, a blur of spotted fur and power. His roar shattered the quiet of the valley, echoing off the distant rock faces. He landed between the python and the cub, teeth bared, claws carving deep grooves in the soil. The python hissed, coiling back, its head rising higher, wide eyes reflecting the sunlight. The cub scrambled behind its father, pressing its small body into the fur of his leg. The female lynx sprinted back across the clearing, ears flat, tail low, growling as she approached. But the python had already chosen its target. It swayed slowly, gathering strength, then lunged again, aiming for the male lynx. The impact shook the grass. The lynx twisted, dodging the fangs, and struck with a heavy paw. His claws raked across the python's head, tearing scales and leaving a dark gash. The snake recoiled, hissing in pain, but its body whipped forward, slamming against the lynx's side. The male staggered, regained his balance, and struck again, jaws snapping shut on the snake's thick body. The python thrashed, wrapping its coils around the lynx's legs, trying to pull him down. The cub yelped, confused and terrified, while the female circled, ready to attack from the other side. The grass flattened as predator and protector collided, twisting in a violent knot of fur and scales. The fight had only just begun, and both sides were far from finished. The air was filled with hissing, growling, and the sharp cries of the cub. Dust and torn grass rose around them. The male lynx bit down harder, his teeth sinking into muscle, but the python's strength was overwhelming. Each movement threatened to topple them both. The cub darted a few steps forward, then froze, too frightened to move closer or further. The mother lynx crouched, ears flat against her head, waiting for the moment to strike. Her eyes burned with urgency, but she knew one wrong move could turn the predator's attention to the cub again. The python's coils tightened, and the lynx's chest heaved, struggling to breathe under the crushing force. The fight was only beginning, but the outcome was still uncertain. The clearing turned into chaos as the python tightened its coils around the male lynx. The snake's body was thick as a tree branch, every muscle straining with deadly precision. The lynx snarled, thrashing, but the more he fought, the tighter the pressure became. His chest heaved as the coils pressed into his ribs, squeezing the air from his lungs. The cub cried out, its tiny voice sharp with fear. It stumbled backward, not knowing where to run, its wide eyes locked on the terrifying knot of fur and scales. The female lynx darted forward, then veered away, circling the predator with measured steps. Her tail lashed, her ears pressed flat. She had to protect the cub while finding a way to free her mate. The python shifted, its head rearing back, tongue flicking. Its eyes focused on the lynx's neck, searching for an opening to deliver a fatal bite. The male lynx bit down harder, his teeth buried deep in the snake's flesh, but the pressure on his chest grew unbearable. His growls turned to ragged snarls as his strength began to falter. The female lynx made her move. With a sharp yowl, she leapt at the snake's midsection, claws slicing through its patterned scales. The python jerked violently, thrashing to dislodge her, and its grip on the male shifted slightly. The cub scrambled to the far edge of the clearing, tripping over tufts of grass, but the mother's strike had bought precious seconds. The python whipped its tail, striking the female across the shoulder and sending her tumbling into the dirt. She rolled, sprang back to her feet, and growled, refusing to back down. Her eyes darted to the cub, then back to the python. Every instinct screamed to defend her offspring, but her mate was trapped, his breath shallow. The male lynx's eyes burned with fury. Summoning the last of his strength, he twisted his head and clawed at the coils crushing his chest. He raked his claws across the snake's body, tearing bloody grooves into its scales. The python hissed, but its coils only dug deeper, squeezing tighter. The lynx's back legs buckled, his body sagging under the relentless pressure. The cub cried again, a desperate, broken sound that cut through the noise of the fight. The mother's focus snapped. She charged once more, this time aiming for the python's head. With a savage leap, she struck, her claws tearing across its eye. The snake recoiled violently, its body convulsing, loosening just enough for the male lynx to gasp for air. He coughed, dragging in a shaky breath, but the python lashed out again. Its jaws snapped inches from his throat, and the coils shifted, tightening around his lower body. The lynx roared, a guttural sound filled with pain and rage. His teeth clenched harder into the snake's flesh, refusing to release even as his vision blurred. The female paced, sides heaving, her fur bristling with adrenaline. She darted forward again, clawing and biting wherever she could reach. Each strike tore new wounds, but the python's bulk seemed endless, its strength undiminished. Dust and blood mixed with the crushed grass beneath them, turning the clearing into a battleground. The cub crouched low near the tree-line, trembling. Its small body pressed into the dirt, ears pinned flat, unable to look away. Every cry from its father sent a shiver through its frame. The young lynx did not yet understand death, but it felt the danger, the crushing weight of the moment. The python hissed louder, coiling even tighter. The male lynx's chest strained, ribs creaking under the force. His breath came in short bursts, each one weaker than the last. His paws scratched desperately at the coils, but his claws slipped on the snake's slick, bloodied skin. His body trembled, on the edge of collapse. The female leapt again, striking the python's wounded eye a second time. The snake thrashed wildly, its massive body rolling across the clearing. The male lynx was dragged with it, still trapped, his claws digging furrows into the ground as he fought to stay upright. The female snarled, circling, her eyes burning with a mix of terror and defiance. The python lifted its head, battered but not broken, and fixed its gaze on the cub. The young lynx froze, its tiny chest rising and falling rapidly. The mother lunged, placing herself between the predator and her child, her growl deep and warning. The python swayed, its tongue flicking again, calculating its next strike. The male lynx sagged, blood dripping from his mouth where he had bitten down. His breaths rattled, shallow and uneven. The coils tightened again, grinding into his body with crushing force. His strength was slipping fast, and every second brought him closer to the edge. John had been walking the ridge that morning, checking the wooden fence that marked the far edge of his property. His land bordered the wild forest, a place where he had seen deer, foxes, and once even a bear. But what reached his ears now was different. A deep growl, followed by the high-pitched cries of an animal in distress, rolled across the meadow like thunder. He stopped, gripping the handle of his walking stick. The sounds continued, violent, desperate. Something inside told him this was not just nature's background noise. He set his jaw and started down the slope, boots crunching through the grass, heart beating faster with every step. As he drew closer, the scene unfolded before his eyes, and it nearly froze him in place. In the clearing, a massive python was coiled tightly around a lynx. The male lynx's body strained against the crushing grip, his snarls ragged and broken. Blood streaked the grass where claws and teeth had ripped through scales. Just beyond, a smaller lynx cub pressed low into the earth, trembling. The female circled frantically, throwing herself again and again at the snake's head, her claws tearing but never enough to end the struggle. John's breath caught in his throat. He had hunted small game in his youth, but nothing like this. He could walk away, he knew that. Nature was cruel, and predators killed to survive. It wasn't his place to interfere, yet the sight of the cub, helpless and crying, twisted something deep inside him. He thought of his own children, grown now, and how once they had been just as fragile. The python hissed, striking at the female, driving her back. The male lynx sagged, barely clinging to life, his chest crushed under the relentless pressure. John felt a surge of urgency. If he left now, the family would be destroyed before his eyes. But if he stepped in, he risked everything. A snake that size could kill a man. His hands tightened on the walking stick. He glanced around and spotted a pile of loose rocks near the edge of the meadow. His mind raced. He couldn't fight the snake directly, but maybe he could distract it, give the lynx a chance to break free. He swallowed hard, testing his courage against the pounding of his pulse. The cub's cry echoed again, high and pained. That sound made his choice for him. He grabbed a rock, heavy enough to strain his arm, and hurled it into the clearing. It landed with a sharp crack against the ground, startling the python. The snake's head lifted, its eyes shifting toward the sound, tongue flicking furiously. The female lynx seized the moment, slashing at its wounded eye again. The snake recoiled, its coils loosening just slightly. The male lynx sucked in a ragged breath, but the pressure remained crushing. John bent, grabbed another stone, and flung it harder. This one struck the python along its thick body. The serpent hissed, twisting, its focus breaking between the lynxes and the new threat beyond the grass. John's stomach churned with fear. He shouted, waving his arms, trying to look bigger, his voice carrying across the meadow. The snake lifted higher, its head swaying in his direction. For a moment, he felt the full weight of its gaze, and his knees nearly buckled. He had stirred something far beyond his control. The female lynx leapt again, and the cub scrambled farther back toward the trees. The male lynx's paws clawed weakly at the coils, his body slick with blood. John grabbed another stone, then another, pelting them toward the python. Most bounced harmlessly off, but one clipped the wounded head. The snake lashed out in fury, uncoiling slightly in its thrashing rage. The male lynx gasped, a guttural, broken sound, and shifted just enough to drag one paw free. His claws raked across the serpent's side, leaving a fresh wound. The python hissed louder, its body rippling with power, torn between prey and the human interference. John's arms ached from the throwing, his breath short, but he forced himself to keep going. He knew one mistake could turn the monster's full attention on him. Sweat streaked his brow, his shirt clinging to his back. He had crossed the line. There was no stepping back now. The meadow rang with snarls, hisses, and John's hoarse shouts. The air itself seemed charged, thick with violence and fear. Every second stretched unbearably long, and John could only hope his gamble would tip the balance. He prayed silently, not for himself, but for the fragile cub cowering in the shadows, and for the lynx that refused to give up even as death pressed down on him. The python twisted again, its head snapping from the lynx to John, its body rippling with fury. It had been forced to split its attention, and in that hesitation lay the smallest chance for survival. John gritted his teeth, heart pounding, as he raised another stone. The outcome of his desperate interference was still far from certain. The python lashed violently, its massive body whipping across the clearing. Each thrash tore furrows in the grass, dirt flying into the air. The male lynx was dragged with it, still locked in the serpent's coils, his breath shallow and broken. John threw another rock, striking the snake's wounded flank. The serpent hissed in fury, its attention torn between the human and the lynxes. The female lynx saw her chance. With a guttural snarl, she launched herself at the python's head. Her claws slashed across its face, ripping deeper into the already injured eye. The snake recoiled, twisting violently. For a split second its coils loosened, and the male lynx forced his body upward with every last shred of strength. He tore free, stumbling onto unsteady paws, his chest heaving for air. The cub squealed from the tree-line, its tiny body quivering with fear. The female darted back toward it, pushing the youngster farther into the grass with her body. The python, enraged and bleeding, struck wildly, jaws snapping at the air. Its head swung toward John, tongue flicking, but the man stepped back quickly, raising his stick in trembling hands. He didn't dare move closer. The male lynx staggered, sides rising and falling in ragged bursts. His fur was soaked with blood and saliva, deep bruises swelling under his ribs where the coils had crushed him. Yet his eyes still burned, locked on the predator that had nearly taken his life. He growled low, each sound more defiance than strength. The python twisted again, but its movements were slower now, clumsier. Blood seeped from torn scales, its head jerking from side to side. The female lynx circled warily, keeping herself between the snake and the cub. She lunged again, striking at its jaw, forcing it to recoil. John's chest pounded as he stood frozen at the edge of the clearing. He could do no more without placing himself in mortal danger. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay still, to let the wild creatures finish what they had begun. This was their fight, not his. Yet the sight of the cub trembling under its mother's belly pulled hard at his chest. The male lynx gathered his breath and lunged one final time. His jaws clamped onto the python's neck just below the head. With every ounce of remaining strength, he bit down. The snake thrashed, its body whipping in wide arcs, tearing up grass and soil. But the lynx held on, his claws digging deep, refusing to release. The female joined, raking her claws down the serpent's side. Together, they turned the tide. The python's movements grew weaker, its strength pouring out with every wound. At last, with a shuddering ripple, the snake uncoiled and slumped to the ground, its body twitching before going still. The clearing fell silent except for the heavy panting of the lynxes. The male staggered back, his chest heaving, eyes glazed with exhaustion. He collapsed onto his side, too weak to stand any longer. The female pressed close to him, licking at the blood on his face before turning to nudge the cub forward. The cub crept cautiously, its body still shaking, and pressed against its father's side. It mewed softly, a sound of both fear and relief. The male's eyes flickered open, and he brushed his muzzle weakly against the tiny form. His breaths were shallow, but the connection was clear. He was still alive. John let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His arms trembled, his legs unsteady beneath him. He lowered his stick and took a slow step back into the shadows of the trees. He knew he had witnessed something few people ever would, a battle between predator and protector, raw and unforgiving. He glanced once more at the lynx family. The male lay battered and broken, the female standing guard, the cub nestled between them. They were alive, though scarred. He felt an ache in his chest, a mix of awe and sorrow. He wanted to help, to do more, but he knew stepping closer could shatter the fragile balance. The sun dipped lower, throwing long shadows across the meadow. The python's lifeless body lay stretched in the grass, a reminder of how close death had come. The lynx family remained huddled together, a fragile circle of survival. John turned away at last, moving quietly back toward the ridge, leaving them to the silence of the wild. As he climbed, he looked back one final time. The cub lifted its head, its eyes wide and still filled with fear. He whispered under his breath, words meant only for himself. Then he walked on, the sound of the battle echoing in his mind, knowing he would never forget what he had seen. But the question lingered in his thoughts, pressing heavier than the stick in his hand. After such a brutal fight, would the cub truly recover? Or would the fear and wounds of this day mark it forever? 3 days passed, and the meadow where the fight had taken place was quiet again. The python's body was gone, carried away by scavengers, leaving only torn grass and faint bloodstains as reminders of the violence. Life in the mountains never paused for long. New sounds filled the air, birds calling, insects buzzing, the wind whispering through the trees. The wild had moved forward, as it always did. John returned to the ridge on the fourth morning. He had not planned to, but something drew him back, a need to know what had become of the lynxes. He carried no stick this time, no stones. Just himself, moving slowly along the familiar path, eyes scanning the clearing below. His heart pounded with anticipation, a nervous energy he couldn't quite explain. At first, he saw nothing. The meadow looked empty, untouched. But then movement caught his eye. From the far side, the female lynx emerged, her body low and steady, scanning the ground. Behind her, the cub bounded forward in clumsy leaps, its small paws trampling the grass. John's lips parted in relief. The youngster was alive, and more than that, it seemed unbroken by what had happened. The cub pounced on a butterfly, missed, and tried again, its tail twitching with excitement. Its tiny growls carried across the meadow, playful rather than fearful. The female watched closely, her ears flicking, but there was no panic in her movements now. She seemed calmer, focused only on guiding her cub as it explored. A few minutes later, the male appeared. He walked stiffly, favoring his side, but he was upright, strong enough to follow. His fur still bore scars where the python's coils had bruised him, and his gait was slower than before. Yet his eyes were clear, his head held high. John felt a weight lift from his chest at the sight. The lynx had survived. Against all odds, he had survived. The family settled near the edge of the clearing. The cub bounded to its father, climbing awkwardly onto his back before sliding off again. The male allowed it, nudging the little one gently with his muzzle. The female lay nearby, stretching out in the grass, her tail curling lazily. For the first time since the fight, peace returned to them. John remained hidden in the shadows of the ridge, watching. He didn't move, didn't call out. This was their world, not his, and he had no right to break the fragile balance they had regained. He simply watched, letting the scene etch itself into his memory. The cub darted across the meadow, chasing a grasshopper, then returned quickly to press against its mother's side. The female licked its head, her eyes soft, before glancing toward the trees as if sensing John's distant presence. He froze, holding his breath, but she didn't react further. She lowered her head and closed her eyes, resting in the sunlight. The male lay down slowly, stretching his battered body on the ground. The cub climbed onto his chest this time, curling into a tiny ball. The father's eyes closed, and his breathing deepened. The family formed a quiet circle of fur, bound not just by survival, but by resilience. The meadow was theirs again. John felt something stir deep inside him. Awe, yes, but also humility. He had stepped into their world once, in a moment of chaos, and perhaps helped tip the balance. But now he understood more clearly than ever. Wild creatures did not belong to him, or to anyone. Their struggles, their victories, their lives, they were their own. He was only a witness, nothing more. The wind shifted, carrying the cub's faint mews up the ridge. John closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He thought of his own children, long grown, scattered across different towns and lives. He remembered holding them when they were small, fragile, and dependent, just like that cub. And he knew that, no matter how much time had passed, the instinct to protect never truly faded. When he opened his eyes again, the lynx family had moved closer together, resting in a patch of sunlight. The cub lifted its head, blinking at the brightness, then tucked itself back into the warmth of its parents. It was safe. It was loved. It had a future. John turned at last, stepping quietly back along the ridge. He didn't need to see more. He had been given a gift, a glimpse into the raw beauty of survival and family in the wild. His boots pressed softly into the earth, each step carrying him away from the meadow and back toward his own world. But the image lingered, the father scarred yet proud, the mother vigilant, the cub full of life. He knew he would carry it with him for the rest of his days, a reminder of how fragile and precious life truly is. And as he walked, a single thought echoed in his mind. Sometimes, to protect what matters most, even the wild will fight with everything it has.